The rain came down in relentless sheets over Dizengoff Street, drumming on awnings and turning the cracked sidewalks slick. Inside Café Zilat Ha'ir, the espresso machine hissed like a tired cat, while closing time crept past 11. Ayala Stern wiped down the counter with the practiced rhythm of someone who had worked doubles for years and still cared enough to keep things decent. Decency to her wasn't a gesture, it was maintenance. A shadow shifted beyond the steamed-over window. She looked up and caught the shape of a boy in a wheelchair huddled under the neon sign. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his jacket soaked through. His hands clutching a frayed blanket that did nothing against the chill. Ayala set the rag aside, pushed open the door, and let the night wind slap her in the face. Hey, Motek," she said, crouching so her eyes were level with his. Motek was Hebrew for sweetheart, a word she used the way other people used umbrellas, often and without ceremony. "What are you doing out here all alone?" He flinched at first, then met her gaze, blue eyes wary and tired. "I'm waiting for my Abba," he said, the consonants soft the way kids soften them when they've been shivering too long. Abba meant dad. He said it like a promise he was trying hard to keep. "Is he close?" she asked, glancing up and down the street. Traffic hissed over wet asphalt. A cell phone repair shop across the way flickered open when it had no business being open. He said a few minutes. The boy murmured. "Okay, you can't sit out here in this. Come inside and warm up while we sort it out." She tilted the chair back with easy practice and eased him over the threshold. Warmth hit them first, then the layered comfort of the cafe. Coffee, steam, lemon soap, and something sweet the baker had overbrowned earlier. Ayala parked the chair by the radiator and brought 2 towels. She draped one over his shoulders and one across his knees. "I'm Ayala," she said. "What's your name?" "Laya. That's a strong name."
Tên cháu là gì?
She kept her voice light. "You hungry?" He hesitated. Hunger and politeness wrestled in his eyes, the way they do for kids who've been told to never be a problem. Ayala didn't wait for a yes. She moved through the small kitchen like it was muscle memory. A fresh loaf of challah, a pot warmed for shakshuka, eggs poached in a bright tomato sauce, because on cold, wet nights, this was what her savta, her grandmother, used to make. She set the plate down, slid over slices of warm challah, and tucked a napkin into his lap. "Zeyalai," she said. "It's on me." Laya's eyes widened on the first bite. The second bite made his shoulders drop. The third landed somewhere near joy. He scooped sauce with challah as if the bread were a small, usable boat. "This is the best thing I've ever had," he said, the words loose with relief. Ayala smiled, then looked toward the window, where rain threaded down the glass in diagonal lines. The night kept itself. She had the odd sense of being watched, and then dismissed it. Closing time meant mopping, receipts. The small epidermis of a day peeled away so tomorrow could put on its new skin. She let the boy eat. Across the street, a sleek black Bentley idled where the curb met a puddle. Tinted glass turned the interior into a negative photograph of the street. Inside sat Ehud Barlev, a man who rationed warmth the way other people rationed battery life. Barlev Innovations, the company he had built and tuned and hardened, ran like a clean machine at the heart of Tel Aviv's tech world. He had told his son to wait near the cafe for a few minutes. Investors had called. The minutes had multiplied. He watched Ayala feed the boy without ceremony and felt something unpracticed, unease maybe, slide along the rib of a belief he had enjoyed for years. That kindness was a pose until proved otherwise. He dialed. "Karen," he said when his assistant answered. "Come to Café Tzilatayr. No suits, no heels, 20 minutes. A pause. "Yes, sir. Find out everything you can about the woman who just fed my son." Inside, Leo finished the last of the shakshuka, and Ayala wiped a streak of sauce from his chin with the gentle, efficient swipe of someone who had nieces and a memory for mess. "You're warmer now," she said. "You want hot chocolate?" He grinned at the word want. She poured, set it down, and let him work on being a kid again. The door swung open on a gust of wet air. A woman stepped in. Jeans, hoodie, a baseball cap tucked low, blonde hair gathered like an afterthought. The cafe was mostly empty. Her presence still rearranged the room the way competence does when it doesn't need to announce itself. Her eyes landed on Leah and softened on command. "Hey, champ," she said, crouching. "Time to go." Leah frowned at the hot chocolate. "I haven't finished. You can take it with you." The woman glanced at Ayala and produced a smile that was pleasant and precise. "I'm his Doda," she said. His aunt. Ayala folded her arms. "You got ID?" The woman didn't blink. She took out a card and held it steady. Ayala checked the name, the photo, the expiration, then looked at Leo. "That true, sweetheart?" He hesitated, just a second, which was long enough to register as a second. "She's here for my Abba," he said finally. Ayala's stomach tightened, not with accusation, but with the memory of 1,000 late shifts where small, wrong things could tip bigger wrong. She picked up the phone on the counter. "I'm going to call to log the handoff," she said, speaking as much to the woman as to the boy. "Non-emergency desk." She dialed, gave the time, the child's first name, the ID name. The license plate the woman recited without prompting. It took less than 2 minutes. It gave the moment shape. "Thank you," the woman said, meaning it. Then to Leo, "Let's get you home." Ayala slid a small paper bag across the table. One rugelach, still warm. "For the road," she said. Leah's grin reappeared, as if it had been hiding in his sleeve. "Thanks, Ayala. You're the best." The woman wheeled him toward the door. Just before they stepped into the rain, she looked back at Ayala and let a fraction of the practiced smile drop. The expression beneath it wasn't unkind. It was a warning. The quiet kind professionals give each other when they both know power can scratch. Headlights blinked across the street. The Bentley's rear door opened with choreography. Ehud stepped out, broad-shouldered in an expensive coat that looked finicky about rain. The boy was transferred into the back seat quickly and gently. The door closed with a sound that was money pretending to be discretion. "Well," Ehud said. Kieran pushed back her hood. "She's sharp. Asked for ID. Logged the handoff. But she let him go. She did the responsible thing," Kieran said. "Documented it. Short of calling the police to physically intervene, this is the cleanest path." Ehud's jaw worked, then settled. "Get me a file. Name, address, background." Kieran's pause was short. "By morning." The Bentley pulled away, a small displacement in the street's wet geometry. Ayala finished closing the cafe. Tips were thin, the drawer balanced by muscle memory. She locked up, tugged her hood to a losing position against the rain, and walked home along Yehuda HaMaccabi Street, where the heat in her building behaved like an old uncle, present, grumbling, unpredictable. In her apartment, one bedroom, thin walls, a window that loved the sound of wind, She kicked off her shoes and leaned against the door. She had learned not to invite trouble. She had learned that trouble doesn't always bother with invitations. There was a knock. No one knocked at this hour. She checked the peephole and saw a man whose coat had its own vocabulary. Tall, composed, grey eyes that took the measure of things quickly and filed them without visible emotion. Who is it? Ehud Bar-Lev. The name meant nothing. What do you want? To talk. Everything in her body said absolutely not. Curiosity. That undisciplined friend said maybe. She opened the door the width of her eye. He looked like the kind of person buildings were built to impress. I don't know you, she said. You know my son, he said, and the clarity of his tone did not invite doubt. Leah, she said. A statement, not a question. He nodded. I was across the street. You were watching. I was. You here to complain I fed your kid? No, he said. I don't believe in charity. But I believe in paying debts. He stepped just inside at her gesture and set an envelope on the small kitchen table, whose surface had a permanent ring from a pot she used for tea. It was a thick envelope, the kind that had architectural opinions. What is that? She asked. A job path, he said. An interview at Bar-Lev Innovations. Tomorrow. HR at 10. You'll meet me at 11 if the first part goes well. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. You're offering a golden elevator to a woman you met 5 minutes ago. I'm offering an opportunity to someone who did the right thing when nobody was watching, he said. Some things you can measure quickly. You don't know me. I know enough, he said. I know you asked for ID. I know you logged the handoff. I know you fed my son without asking for anything, and you didn't perform it. That's rare. Her name sounded different in his mouth when he said it next. Ayala, as if he were testing the weight. Pride and suspicion fought in her chest until exhaustion told them both to sit down. She looked at the envelope again. You always walk into strangers' apartments with offers. No, he said. I prefer offices. Tonight is an exception. If it makes you more comfortable, bring someone with you to HR. Background checks. References. The works? She said. The works? He said. Nothing happens off paper. She picked up the envelope, not because she had decided, but because the table looked unbalanced with it just sitting there. I'll think about it. Good, he said. He left without trying to fill the air with any version of politeness he didn't use. Sleep found her the way weather does, eventually, after some argument. In the morning, she woke with the decision already made somewhere beneath language. She ironed a blazer that had cost her 2 weeks of tips and put on shoes that looked better than they felt. She took a bus that clipped every pothole in Tel Aviv and walked the last block to a glass building that reflected light the way power does, clean, directional, faintly indifferent. HR saw her at 10. A woman with calm eyes and practical hair walked Ayala through forms, a resume upload, a background check consent, and a brief practical. Talk through a time you de-escalated someone in public. Read this email thread and draft a reply that acknowledges concerns while protecting the company. Role-play a vendor negotiation that tries to slip in a late fee. Ayala's answers were not theatrical. They were effective. At 10:57, HR sent her up. Ehud's office felt like a set built to be both seen and used. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that understood both work and posing, a view of the city that made the city look like it belonged to whoever stood here long enough. He gestured to the chair. "You're 2 minutes early," he said. That's 2 minutes I won't have to steal back, she said. A corner of his mouth acknowledged the line without committing to a smile. You handled HR, he said. Good. The door opened and Kieran Cohen walked in with a tablet, balanced like it belonged to her, which it did. She glanced at Ayala, not hostile, not welcoming, assessing like a person who made a living being useful to decisive men. Miss Stern, Kieran said. Welcome. We know each other, Ayala said, easy. Kieran didn't flinch. We do. We're meeting Galil Group at noon, Ehud said. They want to move production to Vietnam. Ayala flipped the tablet when he slid the summary across. Numbers, projections, the kind of cheerful brutality that hides in efficiency charts. You want to stop them, she said. I want to keep the company sound, he said. Sometimes those overlap. And my role? Read people, he said. Find leverage, move the room. You brought me in to be a conscience with teeth. I brought you in because you didn't wait to be told to do the right thing, he said. Conscience is optional. Initiative isn't. At noon, the conference room was colder than the office by a few degrees, and a philosophy. Glass everywhere. Sound behaved itself. The Galil delegation arrived on time. Men who had practiced the art of never appearing rushed. The leader, Gilad Neiman, had the pleasantly carnivorous look of someone used to getting his way and being thanked for it. We appreciate efficiency, Gilad said after the first exchange of courtesies was disposed of. Moving assembly will reduce costs, increase responsiveness, and remove a few thousand jobs from a city that has built our capacity, Ehud said. He didn't change tone. He didn't need to. It's not personal, Gilad said, smiling a smile that had never once been about kindness. Just business. Ayala could have rolled her eyes. She didn't. She waited until the moment when waiting became its own form of agreement, and then leaned in. Let's talk about business, she said. Your short-term savings are real. Your mid-term volatility is too. When the new hub adjusts wages after the first 2 years, your margin narrows. Retooling costs hit you again when you bring specialized steps back to Israel to meet quality complaints. PR costs don't live in a spreadsheet, but they live. Investors hate whiplash. Gilad looked at her properly for the first time. And you are? Ayala Stern, she said. Barlev Innovations. He gave her a once-over calibrated to dismiss. She let him. Here, she said, sliding a memo. Case comps, headlines, labor curves. I've highlighted the parts that hurt. Silence sat down. Numbers have a way of doing that when they contradict what a room wants to believe. Ehud waited without performing the wait. Gilad's mouth did a thing pride does when it meets data. It can't easily swat. We'll revisit the proposal, Gilad said finally. Do that, Ehud said. After in the hallway, Ayala exhaled like a diver who had misjudged depth by a meter and still come up clean. Well, she asked. I knew why I invited you,
authorize those transfers.
Ehud said. Because HR liked my handwriting. Because clarity has a tone, he said. You have it. 2 months carved themselves into a pattern. Ayala learned the building's moods, where the coffee was drinkable, which elevators sulked, which executives said yes when they meant no. She didn't bend.
This is what you left.
People adjusted. Kieran remained precise, and, in her way, kind. Ehud remained Ehud. Disciplined, occasionally cutting, not careless. The work sat between them like a negotiated truce. Then the floor shifted. Kieran caught Ayala outside a meeting room. We have a problem, she said. Define problem. Kieran handed her a printed email. Classified financials. forwarded to a reporter. The sender field wore Ayala's name like a borrowed coat. "This isn't mine," Ayala said. Her voice did not rise. "I know," Kiran said. "Someone wants it to be." The board had seen it. Ehud had too. Inside his office, the air felt colder by more than the 2 degrees the thermostat allowed. He studied her over his clasped hands. "Tell me I wasn't wrong," he said. "You weren't," she said, and put the email down like it might stain the desk if it stayed in her hand. "This is a frame. We'll find out whose," he said. "We?" "We," he said. "Kieran's already tracing headers. It was routed through an external server. We'll need to be smarter. And if the board decides I'm the easiest way to look decisive?" she asked. "Then we'll make them regret their timing,"
The true measure of leadership
he said.
lies in
They worked
accountability.
past midnight. Logs, breadcrumbs, the satisfying click of an error made by someone who thought they were very careful. By morning, a path emerged. An account tied to Omar Sharan, a senior executive with a record of letting other people get their hands dirty. Outside counsel mirrored servers. Timestamps aligned. The line held. Ayala didn't wait to be summoned. She walked into the boardroom carrying a folder heavy with proof, and the part of her that had been a waitress for a decade walked beside the part of her that was now something else. "Miss Stern," a board member said. "Please sit." "I'll stand," she said. "You should too for this." She slid the folder forward and let the room read. The shift was visible. Posture, throat clears, the saccade that moves from disbelief to calculation. "This is traced mail," she said. "Bank transfers. Calls to 2 reporters. All roads lead to Sharon. Copies are with legal." Sharon blanched. "This is absurd." "Is it?" she asked and looked at Ehud. "No," he said. "It isn't. Effective immediately," Ehud said after the requisite corporate sentences were pronounced. "Omar Sharan is terminated. Legal will proceed." The silence that followed felt less like peace and more like the pause after lightning when everyone waits for the thunder to catch up. Ayala did not smile. She didn't need to. Outside, Tel Aviv rinsed itself clean, or tried to. Inside, Ayala stood very still and felt something settle, less victory than alignment, the quiet, durable click of a life choosing itself. For now, anyway. 2 weeks later, Tel Aviv did the thing it always did after a storm. It pretended nothing had happened and then proved it by blooming. Jacarandas spilled purple down secondary streets. Outdoor tables reappeared like a trick of hand. Kites showed up at the beach, colorful proof that the sky could be used for more than rain. On a breezy Thursday evening, Ayala stood at the back of an auditorium at a school where they made a point of putting ramps in first and posters later. Laya's class had just filed in by rows, a procession of hair gel and borrowed ties, sashes and sneakers, a small parade of persistence. Laya's name hit the microphone and turned into applause. He wheeled forward in a new chair that moved like it knew him. His hair had that just-fought-with-gel look 14-year-olds try on when they want to be both proper and themselves. He grinned toward the back of the hall, found Ayala where she tried, not very successfully, to be inconspicuous, and held up the diploma like a ticket to a thing he absolutely planned to board. "You made it," she told him 15 minutes later, out by the fig tree where people hugged in clusters and took photos they would insist on framing. He handed her a crumpled program that had his name circled 3 times. She smoothed it. Not because it needed smoothing, but because hands sometimes need something to do when hearts are busy. "I told you," he said. "You never doubted me." right? Not for a second. Ehud approached the way men approach when they have not yet decided whether their presence counts as crowding. He wore a suit that understood celebratory evenings, and he looked, to Ayala's surprise, a little uncertain. His gaze went from his son to her, then back again. "You did well," he said to Lior. "He did," Ayala said. She let the pronoun sit there where everyone could see it. Ehud accepted the grammar. Karen appeared, somehow both visible and not, with water bottles and a small paper bag that turned out to contain rugelach, because some traditions are portable. "From a place that takes the butter seriously," she told Lior. "You're allowed to eat 3 before dinner and lie about it if necessary." Lior grinned and took 4. "That's math," he said. Later, after relatives had swept the boy into more photos, and a cousin had promised to teach him a card trick badly, Ehud walked with Ayala toward the parking lot. The sky did that Tel Aviv thing, where sunset goes from gold to neon without a transition. "You kept your head," he said. His tone made it sound like a compliment in his language. "You kept your word," she said. "That's harder for some people than it should be." "I've noticed," she said dryly. They stood for a moment, saying nothing, performing the very modern ritual of being in proximity without pretending it was intimacy. Then Ehud said, "There's something else. There usually is. We've been asked to present in Geneva," he said. "A partnership convening around ethical labor in technology supply chains." Ayala raised an eyebrow. "You planning to say the phrase ethical labor and not get laughed off the stage?" "I'm planning to say it and mean it," he said. "Which is harder and therefore worth doing. And do you want me to help write the case?" he said. "We need the story that explains the numbers, because the numbers alone will be insufficient for people who believe that only numbers matter." "Story with receipts," she said. "Precisely." She did not agree on principle. She agreed because she had already been turning phrases in her head since the first factory walkthrough she had done a week prior, when a veteran line manager explained why 10 minutes of unscheduled rest in the afternoon could extend a worker's career by 3 years. "I'll bring coffee," she said. "Bring questions," he said. "We have good coffee." The Geneva deck came together over 2 weeks of long days and one very long night, where the power briefly flickered and someone in legal swore in a way that made the swearer sound briefly religious. Ayala wrote with numbers on her left and names on her right. She paired statistics with stories like they were twins who had been separated for a decade and were now catching each other up. She kept the verbs active and the claims testable. She made sure the most compelling line wasn't the most convenient one. On the flight, Kieran slept like a person who trusted pilots and planning. Ehud watched a documentary about bridges and took notes in the margins like he was auditing physics. Ayala stared out at a sky the color of an uncommitted ocean and practiced the opening aloud until she could say it as if she had just discovered it. The presentation landed with a sound that wasn't applause first. It was a small cessation of movement, people stilling in their chairs, followed by the measurable response. Questions. Actual questions, not the kind meant to show the questioner's face to the room. When they left the stage, Ehud didn't smile exactly, but the muscles in his jaw did something adjacent to a smile's work.
"All right, class. Let's
"You were
turn our
right,"
attention to
he
today's
said as they walked down a carpet engineered to shrug off expensive shoes. The story made the numbers audible. The numbers made the story defensible, she said. "We're a duet." Don't say that on the record, he said. I won't, she said, and did not add that she had already written the internal memo the same way. They flew back to a city that
That's a
did
great
not
question.
celebrate them, because that is not how cities behave. They returned to inboxes that had evolved aggressively in their absence. There were small fires and one medium one, all solvable. There was also a note from the principal at Lyle's school asking for volunteers for a mentorship afternoon. Ayala went. She wore the blazer that upgraded her posture and the shoes that made her patient. She told a room of kids that knowing how to read a room was not the same as giving the room what it already wanted. She told them that sometimes the bravest sentence is a question that refuses to flatter. A boy in the third row asked what to do when adults underestimated him. Take their underestimation, she said, and use it to do your work where they are not looking. Then show your work so clean they have to look. Leah watched from the back and looked like a person who was not surprised by any of it and still pleased. The thing about momentum is that people think it lasts longer than it does. By autumn, the company had 2 initiatives in motion and a third in procurement purgatory. Ayala found herself in more meetings where her job was to translate other people's urgency into shared priority. She did what she had always done, listened until the quiet bits surfaced, then spoke briefly enough that the quiet could stay. It worked until it didn't. The second leak wasn't a leak. It was a breach attempt that looked briefly like a fire and then turned out to be an ember. Security got there first. Kieran got there second. Ayala arrived with coffee and the annoyingly correct suspicion that the ember had been blown on purpose. The trace led to a contractor who had been promised a promotion by a different company 2 years ago and had decided to make himself someone's problem. Legal handled it. The lesson kept. Ehud added a line to his invisible creed. Document even what your pride tells you you can simply endure. Winter is a season in Tel Aviv that behaves like a rumor, present, but never certain about its confidence. It rained 2 days in a row, which felt like a decision. On the second night, Ayala fell asleep on her couch with a book open face down like a bird resting. She woke at 3 to a knock. She thought of ghosts and mistakes, then put both aside and checked the peephole. Kieran stood in the hallway holding a folder and a delicately balanced thermos tray that announced immediate need. He's at Ichilov, she said when Ayala opened the door. It's not catastrophic. It is not nothing. The ride was short and long at once. In the acute care corridor, Ehud sat on a plastic chair like it was where he had always planned to be. The way people do when they do not wish to be moved by anyone's idea of gentleness. Leah slept, an oxygen cannula at his nose, a monitor saying things quietly. The attending had the practiced face of a person who gives truth in units that can be metabolized. Pneumonia, Kieran said. He overdid it. He underreported it. They're treating it aggressively. Ayala stood at the foot of the bed and did the least spectacular thing humans get to do for each other. She stayed. Later, after the attending left, and respiratory therapy had adjusted a thing that did not seem adjustable, and the room had learned the sound of the machines, Ehud said, "You can go." His voice did not quite sound like itself. "I can," Ayala said. "I won't." He nodded once, as if she had spoken a language he knew but never bothered trying to master. At 5 in the morning, Kieran took a turn that looked like a person's idea of sleep. At 7, the boy's fever broke the way small storms do. At 9, Leor opened his eyes, squinted at the ceiling, and said, "This hospital has terrible rugs."
It is a lot to process.
"They do," Ayala said solemnly. We will file a report. Ehud's exhale sounded like glass being unground. He closed his eyes for a count of 3 that looked like the first prayer he had said in a decade. Thank you, he told the room, and then, less diffusely, told Ayala. You're welcome, she said. She resisted the urge to say, of course, not everything wants to be minimized. Recovery moved the way recovery does. Forward, sideways, briefly backward, forward again. When discharge papers finally existed, Ayala walked out into daylight and felt the city as if it had been paused and then restarted. We were lucky, Kieran said, as if luck were a variable one could invite and teach manners to. We were careful, Ayala said, and lucky. Work did not stop because life asked it to. The Geneva talk led to a partnership that turned into a pilot that wanted to become a program. Ehud floated the idea of a foundation that could exist next to the company without pretending to be the same thing. We do not need to pretend everything we do is business, he said. We can allow some of it to simply be good. You're going to let a thing exist that does not show a profit? Ayala asked, teasing. It will show returns, he said. Different ledger. The Stern Barlev Foundation came into being the way sturdy things do. Slowly, with paperwork, with arguments about bylaws, with someone insisting on a logo that was too clever and being told no. They raised money on purpose and not by accident. They opened a community center that taught practical skills and hired good people and kept its promises. It became, in the neighborhood, the kind of place people said with a shrug and a little pride, try there. On the day of the ribbon cutting, Laia stood next to Ayala, holding oversized scissors, with the solemnity of a judge and the glee of a kid being allowed to do a thing adults usually claim. You're going to cry, he told her, grinning. Probably, she said. You're going to pretend not to. Definitely, he said. She cried. He pretended not to. Ehud gave a short speech that understood the difference between gratitude and performance. Kieran made sure the microphones worked, and the press got clean quotes and the volunteers were fed. The sign on the entryway said what it needed to say in letters that would still read clean in 40 degrees of sun. The day did what good days do. It folded into the lives around it and made them slightly more possible. The work was the work. It multiplied because it was useful. When calls came in from schools in Be'er Sheva and Haifa and Lod, the foundation said yes as often as it could, and no when yes would be a lie. Ayala refused to let it become a sheen pasted on top of harm. She kept a list that only she saw of the times they had failed or fallen short. She read it when people congratulated her too loudly. She read it when she needed reminding that the point was not to be thanked. Years moved the way years do. Briskly when you didn't look, slowly when you measured. Laia became older without the permission of the people who remembered his cheeks. He learned his own versions of stubbornness and grace. He took a gap year he called a map year and worked in a lab that chose patience as a methodology. He came back with ideas and the kind of humility that isn't a performance. He asked Ayala to read an essay and then argued with her edits, and then adopted half of them with a grin. One evening, while the city took a breath between heat and heat, Ayala and Ehud stood on the balcony outside his office, a place no one took photos because it felt too private for that. The street below practiced its choreography. The sea in the distance did what seas do, pretended to be motionless until someone stared long enough to see it move. You ever regret it? She asked. What? Letting the company be seen? She said. Letting yourself be seen. A little. He considered the distance the way some people consider a chessboard. Visibility is a cost, he said. It is also currency. You spend it for the right things.
Missouri.
And who decides which things are right? We do, he said. And then we accept we will be wrong sometimes. You sound almost human, she said. Don't tell anyone, he said. The next crisis was small and personal, and therefore not small. A rumor about Ayala and Ehud circulated in a way that gossips pretend is concern. It landed in a board meeting because everything lands in a board meeting if someone has the stamina to carry it there. Ayala listened, arms loose at her sides. Ehud listened and said nothing. Kieran listened and adjusted her jaw exactly once. When the concerned party paused for breath, Ayala said, "If you have an allegation, make it. If you have a policy question, ask it. If you have a problem with my work, bring data." Silence behaved itself. "Otherwise," she said, "we can return to the agenda." They returned. Later, in the hallway, she said to Ehud, "You could have said something. I hired you to do precisely what you just did," he said. "Anything I add would have reduced it." "That's convenient," she said, but her mouth betrayed her with the beginning of a smile. The rumor died because rumors do not live long when there is nothing to eat. Respect, very quietly, replaced it. It was not universal. Nothing worth having is. It was enough. On a Friday morning that arrived caramelized at the edges by the sun, Ayala went back to the café where the story had first made itself known to her. Café Zilat Ha'ir had the same neon, a new espresso machine that hissed less and worked better, and a table near the radiator that remembered a small boy and a towel. The owner had changed the cookies and kept the bread. Ayala ordered shakshuka the way some people order memory. The waiter smiled like he lived in a city that takes food personally and made sure the challah was warm. A kid came in, soaked to the elbows, argued with his umbrella, lost, laughed. A woman at the corner table drew a line on a legal pad through a to-do that had clearly been arguing with her for a week. A delivery guy flirted with the register and left with baklava as a tip. The street outside kept adding itself up. Ayala finished and left cash under the saucer, because sometimes the right technology is a folded bill. She stepped out into a morning that had decided to be better than it needed to be and let it. When she reached the corner, she heard wheels behind her and turned. Leah coasted up, hair damp, grin intact. "You were going to leave without saying hi," he accused, scandalized in the way only the young can manage without irony. "I was going to text you a photo of the Rugelach and let you experience longing," she said. "Cruel," he said. "Effective." He looked at the cafe sign. You ever think about how weird it is? One night, one sandwich, one phone call, and my life looks different. I think about how there were 1,000 choices before and after that night, she said. But yes, the sandwich was excellent. He laughed. They walked. The city rehearsed the afternoon around them. Much later, when Ayala sat in the executive office with her name on the door and a line outside of people who wanted 10 minutes of outcome, she would sometimes catch sight of the envelope Ehud had placed on her kitchen table that first night. She had kept it. Empty. The way symbols are when the thing they ushered in has gone on ahead without them. She kept it because it reminded her that debts, correctly understood, are not about owing. They are about recognizing the weight of care when it arrives and deciding to carry it forward rather than back. That day came, as days do, and she stood at a podium in front of staff and partners and stubbornly hopeful people from the city who had learned not to waste their hope. She spoke about process and patience and the glory of boring systems that do exactly what they promise. She thanked the team. She forgot to thank herself, and was fine with that. When she finished, Ehud stepped up, said fewer words, each chosen like a stone in a wall, and stepped back. After, in the hallway, Lior intercepted her with a hug that ignored any protocol about executives or eye lines or the possibility of cameras. "Vice President of Corporate Strategy," he said, milking each syllable for ceremony. "Savta would be obnoxiously proud." "She already is," Ayala said, looking up at the ceiling as if somewhere above them a grandmother held court and refused to let anyone leave hungry. "Come on," Leo said. "Kieran says there's cake, and also a schedule we're supposed to pretend we didn't rearrange." "Responsibly," Kieran said from behind him without looking up from her tablet. "We rearranged responsibly." They ate cake that tasted like someone in procurement had an aunt who baked and refused to use margarine. They stood near a window where the city insisted on existing. They went back to their desks because the world is not changed by cake, however excellent. It is changed by the unsexy miracle of people doing the work. And because stories like to close their circles when allowed, Ayala left the building that evening into a light rain that couldn't decide whether it meant to commit. Across the street, a boy about 8 stood under a too small umbrella that had chosen form over function. His mother was one step away, arguing with a rideshare app that had, in that moment, decided it was philosophy and not logistics. The boy's shoes were soaked through. He did not complain. He looked at the puddle in front of him with the consideration of an engineer. Ayala reached into her tote and found, among papers and pens and a receipt that had ambitions, a small paper bag she had planned to ignore. "For the road," she said, and handed it over. The boy smiled. The mother took the bag, startled, then grateful. "Toda," she said. "Thank you." "Bevakasha," Ayala said. "You're welcome." She did not narrate to herself the significance of it. She did not need to. The city held the story. The people in it did the work of keeping each other possible. The rain softened. The neon tried on brightness. Ayala went home the long way and let the night arrive without argument.